Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. I've got an Apple MacBook Pro here. This is what are you, this is a 2014, I think. 2013 or 2014. The giveaway is whether it has the forced trackpad or not. This trackpad clicks while the laptop is off, so I immediately know that it's not a 2015 because the forced trackpad doesn't have a physical click on it. It's simulated with weird coils and stuff that I've never quite understood how they work. Anyway, we're refurbing this thing. It's getting a little bit tired, but the customer wants to refurb it. The speakers in it are shot, so we're replacing the speakers. The headphone jack is questionable, so we're replacing that. And the battery is also questionable, so we're replacing that. So let's roll the intro and get into it. Right, so let's flip this guy over, and the first thing, I've already taken the screws out the back. The customer had previously taken it to another shop. This was like a year ago, and another shop had allegedly replaced the speakers on it. However, when I was doing my initial inspection on this, viability checks and stuff like that, I opened it up and I saw the dust, and I saw, the grot and the dust, and I looked at the speakers and I was like, lady, I don't think anyone replaced the speakers in this laptop. I think someone was telling porcupines. So that's an interesting thing to note here, because once you replace the speakers in these, because they do go, when we take these speakers out, we'll have a look at them. We'll probably find that they've got ripped cones on them. If you replace them, they should be good for the lifetime of the laptop at that point, because this laptop is, this thing is clocking on 8 years old, maybe 9 years old. So, the speakers have lasted that long. If they were actually replaced last year, it should be okay. Or someone's telling porcupines and didn't replace them, or they put secondhand speakers in. I would not recommend putting in secondhand speakers unless you're trying to do it for literally zero money. Because brand new speakers, these were like 15 quid on eBay. These brand new speakers. So it's just like, why would you bother with that? Why would you fret? Likewise, here's our new headphone jack. Luckily, this guy is a single module. One of the nice things about this, the modern Macs, is that it is a separate module for the headphone jack, so it's actually replaceable. So sometimes there is good design in these computers. And then finally, I got this EgoWay battery to go in there. It's a cheap battery. But I've found that they seem to do the job, these EgoWay ones. It's not my first choice. However, this one has the weird offset battery, and my usual choice of Ninja Bat wasn't available. So we're going to have to more or less completely strip this thing down to take out the speakers and the headphone jack. Not so good design, but whatever. So I'm just going to start taking this thing apart. So let's pop the battery out and pop the SSD out. So where's my T5? So I'm going to start by taking out the SSD over here, and then I'm going to remove all of the other cables that are connecting the motherboard up. So let's just pop all of these out. Oh, that was very loose already. Interesting. And next I'm going to take out the fans as well. And once the fans are out, I can take the screws for the logic board out, and the logic board will come out. And we're going to, we'll need to undo screws at each end of the heat pipe, but the heat pipe itself doesn't need to come out. Well, that will come out with the logic board. And there's lots of bits of dust that are coming out with all of this as well, but I tend to clean everything as I reassemble, and I don't fret about it while I'm taking it apart. Right, and up we come. Oh, this I/O board has got to come out as well first. It's fine. Needed to come out anyway. So there's the full access to one speaker. So that's the right-hand side speaker. And then the left hand we should get to once we lift this guy up. Is there anything holding me up? Should lift. Yep, it's coming along. If you're not sure, just have a lift, have a feel. There we go. That's still holding me up. Just avoid trying to bend the board when you do this. That's the only risk when you're testing it like this. MagSafe. Alright, there's our board removed. Lots of dust on the bottom of this. See, this is why I questioned the previous shop, because like, even if they put in secondhand speakers, they didn't clean anything. Now, also, apparently this work was done like a year ago. And, you know, a year is a long time. You know, stuff builds up. But, like, this is the lifetime of the laptop's worth of dust. This is. That's not a year's build up. No way. Not unless it was sitting in, like, you know, unless it was sitting in, like, a hay barn or something like that. You know, I don't believe for one moment that this laptop has ever been disassembled. Right, put that to one side, and we'll take out the headphone jack over here. So I've never actually taken one of these out. I think it's just those two screws there holding it in now. Whoop, there we go. So when I tested this guy, it was working, but the customer was reporting that they were having issues with it. And a replacement one was so cheap, it was like £5 or something like that, I think. Knowing that you have to take the logic board out in order to remove this, I said to the customer, look, I'm not, it might not be faulty. However, it is old, and given that we're taking the whole laptop apart to do the speakers anyway, we may as well do it while we're there. So that's why we're taking this guy out. Right, and now the speakers themselves can come out too. And I believe it was the left-hand speaker that was sounding completely shot. So this is the one where I think we're going to get to go, oh, look at that. There we go. Right, it's all black on black here. However, the cone there has torn, it's split. So that's why this guy sounds incredibly muffled. It just comes across as a when it makes any noises. So it's very unpleasant. But yeah, that cone's completely gone. This guy's probably okay, but the actual woofer part, that's the bit that actually has all the oomph. And yeah, that guy's kill. And the other side. Oh, that's interesting. This one looks different. Did the last shop replace just one of the speakers? I think they did. I think they just replaced the one, presumably... Hang on, let me get the other one. These speakers are not matched. So I think the previous shop did take the laptop apart. They replaced the right-hand speaker, which wouldn't have been too difficult to do because you only have to take out the I/O board for that. So they replaced the right-hand speaker that must have had a torn cone and didn't bother doing the left speaker, presumably because at the time maybe it was not torn. So this is really dumb for two reasons. Number one, you've got mismatched speakers, so the balancing isn't going to sound right. And number two, if one of the speakers has died and has ripped its cone, the other one probably isn't far behind. This is why, you know, like... This is the reason why you don't replace single brake pads on a car at a time. If one of them is worn down, the other probably isn't far behind. So you just replace them as a pair. Why mess about? Yeah. Big sad. Oh well, that explains that. So, well, to their credit, it looks like they did actually do some work on the laptop. They just didn't do it properly. Okay, right, now we've got to take out this battery. Now, looks like I'm going to have an easy time of this because this is an aftermarket battery. It has been changed before. So, because of that, yeah, I think I can just rip this guy out. Normally, this is the point where I'd have to get a where I'd have to soak everything in alcohol. But I think if I just do a little bit of prying here, this is all going to pop out. Oh, he says being unable to pry. Nope, alcohol it is. While I let that sink in for a moment as well, I'm also going to take the display assembly off because the display is really wobbly. So I'm going to go ahead and just tighten up the hinges while I'm here. This one isn't on the list of things to do, but again, given that I'm doing this much work to the laptop, it feels like it feels very foolish not to do it while I'm here. Ugh. By the same token, I might go all the way and like do the thermal paste and everything. I'm usually, I've said in other videos before, when people say sort of, oh, why didn't you replace the thermal paste? I usually say, well, I wasn't asked to replace the thermal paste. You know, like I haven't been asked to tighten the hinges on this thing. So if something goes wrong and I damage this display and I say to the customer, oh, I'm sorry, the display fell apart when I took it apart to tighten the hinges, they might just turn around and say, why were you messing around with the hinges? I didn't ask you to do that. This is why you have to be super careful with how much or how little you do. However, on this particular model, I'm not in fear of anything particularly bad happening if I touch these things. So you need to make a judgment call as to how much or how little you're going to do with a computer. I am a big believer that sometimes less is more. However, I leave that up to you. I'm going to drift off shot for a sec while I just take these last couple of screws out. There we go. Put that to one side for a moment. Right, let's get this battery out, then we can clean everything up and start reassembling with new parts. That's all out. Let's just take the battery screws out as well, just so this bit can lift up when it's ready to. One. Two. Come on, get out. There we go. Bleh. Ugh. All right. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to brush down all of these parts we've got. So I'm just going to get a paintbrush and just gently just brush all of the dust and the grit and the grot out of this. I will also just brush down the main logic board as well. And then we can come back. I'll redo the thermal paste on these just so that's done. And then we'll start putting new parts back in again. So I will see you in a mo. Right. So as you can see, these hinges are mega loose. So I'm just going to slide this to the right, I think. Oh, there we go. Right, that has moved. So I should just be able to ease that off now. And need to do that with a little bit of care, just because if you break the clips on these, they can become very awkward. Where is my prying tool? I've got too much stuff on the bench at the moment, so I'm having to lift things up to find tools, and that's a bad place to be. Also, though, it's 10 to closing time on a Friday afternoon, and I'm like, I'm just looking to get done. Now, I'm just going to give this a little bit of persuasion before I try and rip it out. There we go, there we go. That's what I want. Come off. Ugh. Good. Right. Now that's off, we can get to these screws here that have come loose. So those are going to be T6s, I think. Got it in my head. No, those are T8s. Ignore me. Yeah. Cool. So I'm just basically going to try and hold these vaguely straight while I tighten the screws up. There is room for adjustment here, but also any misalignment we have here we can adjust out when we put it back into the body of the laptop. But we do kind of want things to be vaguely straight. We are screwing into metal here, although aluminium, so we can be fairly vicious, but, you know, as vicious as small screwdrivers will allow us to be. This is a really good quality of life improvement if you're refurbishing old laptops, because it just gets rid of that slop and play in the screen. Settle that into place and slide to the left. There we go. And now those hinges are not going to be all sloppy and loose when we put that back on. Perfect. Right, I'm going to fit the speakers and the new headphone jack, and we can start putting everything else in around it. Let's see. Right, so that's our left-hand speaker. Anything interesting about that? Not really. Good. I'll put the I/O board in now since I can. So that's going to fit down there. And when you're putting the I/O board or the logic board in, the ports along the side here, they've got these little springy bits on top. Just make sure that those are tucked underneath the edge here rather than going over the top of it, because it's very easy for those to get caught over the top of the chassis and then nothing will seem to fit right. And you won't know why. Right, I'm going to put the logic board in next, but first we're going to just take off that cooler and redo the thermal paste just for good measure. So I'll just carefully undo these. Take it easy on these screws because obviously it is under tension, and the standoffs for these screws, they do actually come off reasonably easily. They can be reattached. I've done videos where I've resoldered them onto the board, so it's absolutely fixable. But obviously a standoff coming off from this heatsink is a disaster, just because it just means that, great, now I have to do solder rework on the board. And that paste is fairly soft. This probably didn't need doing. I would call that okay. We'll do it anyway, now we're here. There's no way of really knowing. We know that we know that there was a reasonable amount of dust in this laptop, so for me that was probable cause. But again, this is one of the reasons why I don't always do the thermal paste, because if there's no reason for it to need doing, it probably doesn't need doing. That much being said though, for me, I think my probable cause on this laptop is just by virtue of sheer age. Any laptop that gets to this point, the thermal paste is probably going to be cooked. I'm now immediately going to do a really horrid pasting job, because the nozzle of my thermal paste syringe, I dropped it and broke the nozzle off, so I now have just an opening. So this is kind of how I apply thermal paste at the moment until I can get through this tube. However, in a shocking and angering statement, it doesn't matter. As long as there is paste. That's a very weighted statement, by the way. There are times when it does matter. However, most of the time it doesn't matter. Let's put these things back on. And I've just taken those screws down to the top. We're not going too tight on them because you will just rip the standoff off of the board. Bad time, man. Good. That guy's ready to go back in. Nice and clean. Right. Rough alignment. Get it in place. And I'll just use the tweezers just to rescue the microphone cable out from under there, just so that doesn't get forgotten. Easy to cover him up. Keyboard flex. All right. That is sitting nicely. That has just dropped into place, which is how we like it. And we've got to make sure that this speaker cable is running to where it needs to go, because it technically is supposed to go under the logic board. If you cock up, you can run it across the top of the logic board there, and that's okay. But obviously it's nice to have it under the logic board. It just means that it's got better... everything just moves nicer. And I'm just going to plug that in straight away to hold it in place. Alright, that's good enough. This is an empty spot here, so we actually have a fair bit of leeway with how that cable sits. Cool. Alright, I'm going to do my keyboard, my logic board screws. And I'm just going to put some of the cables into place now, just to start reducing the stuff we have to do later on. I find plugging stuff in as and when you can just makes it look a bit less daunting as you start putting everything else in, because the laptop starts looking complete. The part where these jobs get the most daunting is when you've got, like, you've put the board in, but nothing is plugged in, nothing is screwed in, and it just doesn't look like it's anywhere close to being finished. Oh! Keyboard backlight. My nemesis. It's not a disaster. I think I can just do a little sneaky rescue there. Nope. More screws are coming out. There we go. Plugging in cables as you go is also a good opportunity to notice when you've got a trapped cable sooner rather than later. Top tip, everyone. Right, and the fans have 3 different screws on them because Apple. There is a normal screw which goes on the back, well, the top of the fan, I guess. There is a stepped screw that goes through the fan, and then there is a flat screw that goes onto the logic board mount. Watch out for the flat screw, because obviously you need to make sure you put the right one in there. If you put a long screw in there, you could long screw the logic board, where the length of the screw just starts drilling a hole into the circuit board. That's a bad time. And also, if you do that up too tightly, you could just rip the standoff off of the board, which is a bad time. Oh, that one's for the SSD. That's the fan screw. No, it's not. I'm wrong again. Those are the fan screws I'm looking for. I did not organise my screws very well for this session, so I'm having to hunt a bit as I go. It's going to go across that. Oh, that hasn't tucked under there very nicely. So down here, the end of the heat pipe should tuck under this plastic assembly, but I put them in out of order. This is solvable because that plastic assembly will just pop off with a little bit of encouragement. So I can take that guy out. There we go. Screw down, and then we can put that plastic cable routing clip back in. There we go, problem solved. Good. All right, I'm going to put on the display assembly now, and then we can go ahead and plug the and fit the battery. Let's stick this guy up the end as well. Right, I've put a screw in on each side, and now I can close the lid of the laptop. Oh, that's not moving in the correct way. What's happening? That was very stiff. Very stiff, which might explain why why the hinges were loose. Okay, let's get those screwed down before we address that. I have a plan. Now I'm just using my fingers just to make sure that everything is lined up, make sure that the screen is on straight, and I'll put in the rest of the screws. Those hinges feel wrong, so I'm going to address that in a moment. I think they are just stiff, and I think what I'm going to try and do is just put a little bit of silicone spray into those. I could use some WD-40, but I'm going to try silicone. Oh, so firstly, where the hinge wasn't fully closed when I lined it up, we've dropped out of alignment. So if I can get the autofocus in there, you can just see where we're not aligned there. That's exactly what I want to avoid. So I'm just going to loosen those screws out a little bit, and I'm just going to correct that, because that's what we don't want. We don't want there to be a bump around the edge of the laptop, because that's something that you'll feel every time you open the laptop. Right, this is a bit of an experiment. I've not tried this before, but let's see how we do. Just going to spray a little bit of this silicone lube into the hinges and then try and work that in. I'm going to grab the toothbrush and just toothbrush them first, just to get dust out of the way. There we go. Alright, I think that's helped a little bit. I'm not sure how much. Interested for other inputs and suggestions on that one. Don't know if that was the best choice, so take that with a handful of salt. That was an experiment. It feels a little bit better. It hasn't changed my world kind of thing, but those should hold up. The problem with these hinges is that they're not really, you can't really open them up and service them in a meaningful way. Not that I've seen anyway. Fine. All right, let's guide these display cables into place. So a display cable on the left, and on the right here we've got the eyesight. Well, we've got the eyesight. Is it still called an eyesight? We've got the webcam and the Wi-Fi antennas. Display cable. Right, this stupid air guide rubber will just continue to flap about until we put the cover down over it. I said in a recent video, but the reason why these bits are here are they provide a seal around the exhaust that stops the exhaust air from recycling back into the fan again. So it makes sure that exhaust air actually leaves the laptop. It is pretty effective, by my understanding. Alright, that's that. We've got 2 screws left for the battery, which I shall now put in. Take the bottom off. Line it up. Put the screws in, because these will dictate where the battery has to sit. Cable on this guy is a bit too long. Not a fan. I think I can wrestle that into place. I might do a little bit of wrangling with this. And now we'll take off the top, because that allows me to move the cells about independently. And I'll just settle those just so they're vaguely straight. There we go. I quite like how they put these rubber strips on this battery, because the bottom case does press in at this point and it does scuff the back of the battery up, which I don't believe that's a real problem, but it's nice to have something there just to avoid the back of the cells getting scuffed up. Good. Right, I think we're finished. Alright, blammo. Chime. Display. It's all good. Right, so we heard straight away from the chime that there was no distortion on the speakers. Alright, these seem to be working pretty good. They lack the punch that I was expecting, but also I might just be spoiled by modern laptops, because just modern laptops have bonkers speakers, man. And like when you hear the latest MacBooks, it is nuts how much bass those things pump out from such tiny speakers. However, the actual mix and the spatial audio and everything, that is working fine. The balance sounds great, so I'm happy that those are all absolutely fine. The battery is also showing 57%, which is great. It's always nice to see when you put a new battery in and it's sitting at half charge, because that's how it should be stored. So that's always a good sign that your battery is fine as well. Good. I'm going to go away and give this thing a proper service. It needs a clean, it needs macOS updating and all of those things, but we don't have time for that in this particular video. So this is where I shall leave you. Thank you very much for tuning in, everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.